Good evening, everyone. Good to be back. I feel like I need to break the pulpit back in. I haven't been up here in a while, but it's good to be back with you all. I'd encourage you to open up your Bibles to Judges chapter 1. Judges chapter 1. That's where we're going to be spending most of our time this evening. Like I said, it's good to be back. Clay began his lesson this morning saying something along the lines of not getting nervous really anymore when he still gets up here. And I was just kind of thinking, boy, speak for yourself. I still get nervous when I get up here, especially when I haven't been up here in a while. But it's so good to see so many familiar faces. It's glad to be back here with you all. As we begin our lesson this evening, I just want you to be thinking about this question, and that is, have you ever set your heart to accomplish something, and you just ended up falling flat on your face? I mean, just failing miserably at whatever it was you had set your heart to do. Maybe it was learn a new language. Maybe it was a New Year's resolution to extinguish a bad habit. Maybe you even told other people publicly, or maybe you posted it on Facebook or something, that you were doing this thing in order to have some sort of accountability, and then it's super embarrassing when you come up short or give up on whatever commitment that you had made. In the Old Testament book of Judges, shortly after committing to serve and to obey the Lord, the nation of Israel completely and miserably fails. They fail in upholding this commitment. And so what I want us to do in this lesson is explore how this tragic failure occurred and how we can prevent this type of failure in our lives and in our church. To begin, what I want to do is actually zoom out for us to observe kind of the big picture of Joshua and Judges. And I want us to notice the way that these two books stand in contrast with each other, and how it reflects a tension that we have in our own lives today. And so what I've got up on the screen here, I've titled it the Joshua-Judges Juxtaposition, which is really just a fancy word for two things being side by side, and they either compare or contrast, and it creates kind of a cool effect. But in order to kind of explore this, I just kind of want to see the themes, the perspectives, and the trajectory of these two books. To begin, let's consider the themes of these two books. I just selected one verse from each of these books that I really felt summarized kind of the overarching theme of the book. In Joshua, the book begins with the nation being united under Joshua's leadership after the passing of Moses. They come out of the wilderness, and Joshua leads the people through the water of the Jordan River to the land of their inheritance that was promised by God to Abraham generations ago. And then the book ends with the people making one final dramatic covenant with God in Joshua chapter 24, verse 24, which is what I've got up on the screen there, where the nation proudly proclaims, "We will serve the Lord our God, and we will obey His voice." However, the book of Judges details, as we're going to see in just a few moments, the rapid deviation from this commitment to God. There's a repeated pattern of deliverance by God, and then the people quickly forsaking God. And after some horrific and disgusting stories that happen in the book of Judges, the book concludes with the very last verse being Judges chapter 21, verse 25, which says, "In those days there was no king in Israel, and everyone did what was right in their own eyes." The perspective of these two books is different as well. As you can see, the perspective of Joshua is written largely from a national focus. The phrase, "all Israel," is used over 20 times throughout the book, with a special focus on Joshua as the national sole leader of Israel. In Judges, however, there's not a consistent national leader. It's written with more of a focus on the individual failings of each tribe. And as we saw with the verses I put up on the screen there, the trajectory of these books is also dramatically contrasted. Joshua has this march about it, onward victory through God. God keeps his promises and the people are victorious through it. And the book leads to that ultimate commitment to God that we talked about because of everything that God had done for them. And Judges leads to a complete lack of morality. It's just this downward spiral. So I hope you're seeing the contrast of these two. Kira and I actually, we kind of helped, we celebrated my grandmother's birthday yesterday, even though it's not till Tuesday. But one of my grandmother's nephews, so I guess he'd kind of be my cousin, I was talking with him last night, and he pointed this out to me as one way to look at the tension of these two books. Look with me at Joshua chapter 24, verse 14. This is Joshua's famous statement about choose this day whom you will serve. He's calling upon the nation of Israel to make a decision that very day who they will serve. And he says, as for me and my house, we're going to serve the Lord. And read with me verses 16 through 18 following these statements. The people answered Joshua and said this, far be it from us that we should forsake the Lord to serve other gods. For the Lord our God is he who brought us and our fathers up out of the land of Egypt, from the house of bondage, who did all these great signs in our sight and preserved us through all the way in which we went, and among all the peoples through whom we passed. The Lord drove out from before us all the peoples, even the Amorites who lived in the land. We also will serve the Lord, for he is our God. And what my cousin pointed out to me is notice how Joshua responds. Joshua responds by saying this. Joshua said to the people, you will not be able to serve the Lord, for he is a holy God. He is a jealous God. He will not forgive your transgressions or your sins. And so one way to look at this kind of contrast between these two books is it's Joshua's statement being played out. The book of Judges is Joshua's statement about you will not be able to serve the Lord, just kind of being played out and extrapolated. And he's making the point that of as long as you keep these other gods in your life, he will not forgive you, and you will fall as a nation. And that's exactly what happens in the book of Judges. So why do I point all this out? This is all just like a lot of context and background. These two books being placed sequentially, one after another, is no accident. The Jewish authors who compiled the Old Testament knew what they were doing. The way these two books stand in contrast leads us to an incredibly important but also very simple point for our own lives, and that is this. When God directs our thinking, we conquer. When we direct our own thinking, we crumble. So let's see this played out in our text in Judges chapter 1. Judges chapter 1. In these first couple chapters of Judges here, the author is just really doing like a survey and a foreshadowing, so we're really just going to do the same thing. We're not going to read all of these verses. We're just going to kind of pull out a few points along the way and just kind of make some application at the end. Look with me at the following verses. Judges chapter 1, starting in verse 19. Now the Lord was with Judah, and they took possession of the hill country, but they could not drive out the inhabitants of the valley because they had iron chariots. Drop down to verse 21. But the sons of Benjamin did not drive out the Jebusites from Jerusalem. I'll go ahead and put the point up on the screen here. Chapter 1, verse 27. Manasseh did not take possession of Beth Shean and its villages, or Tanakh and its villages, and so on and so forth. So the Canaanites persisted in living in that land. Continuing on in verse 29. Ephraim did not drive out the Canaanites. Verse 30, Zebulun did not drive out the inhabitants. 31, Asher did not drive out the inhabitants. Verse 33, Naphtali did not drive out the inhabitants. As we can see, Israel did not drive out the inhabitants. Tribe after tribe failed to take possession of their land. They had received their inheritance, the land that was promised to them, and yet they didn't take full advantage of it. Now, in chapter 2, what happens at the beginning of chapter 2, this messenger angel comes from God, and the message that this angel brings is this. Chapter 2, verse 1. I brought you up out of Egypt and led you in the land. Oh, sorry, this is verse 2. I brought you up out of Egypt and led you into the land which I have sworn to my fathers. And I said, I will never break my covenant with you. And as for you, you shall make no covenant with the inhabitants of this land. You shall tear down their altars. That was the command given to the people, but we see right after that, the angel says, you have not obeyed me. The angel is speaking on behalf of God as a messenger. He's saying, you did not obey me. What is this that you have done? Therefore I also said, I will not drive them out before you, but they will become as thorns in your sides, and their gods will be a snare to you. When the angel of the Lord spoke these words to all the sons of Israel, the people lifted up their voices and wept. And so they named that place Bochum, which means weeping. And there they sacrificed to the Lord. Now, I made a specific point about not tearing down the altars. Because what are altars for? What are altars for? Sacrificing. Altars are for sacrificing. And I don't know about you, but I've been guilty of thinking before, oh, those Israelites are just, they're a bunch of silly gooses. Why would they sacrifice to gods other than Yahweh, who is so good? Have you ever thought that before? Why would they do that? Why, they just saw the whole, leading out of Egypt thing? That was still conversation. Why in the world would they serve these other gods? Think of it this way. Does it ever happen today where Christians, God's people, see wicked and cheating people in the world succeeding? Maybe it's business, maybe it's politics. And these Christians try to start bending the knee to those same wicked and cheating ways. Those fake gods, in order to achieve that same success that they see the wicked people having. Have you ever seen that before? Christians, good people start bending the knee. They start compromising in order to achieve worldly riches or success. Think back to Israel. Think, how was the land of Canaan described to them? A land flowing with milk and honey. The land is strong. The people are strong. They have fortified towns. They have nice, big, structured cities. Think of the story of Jericho and its great wall. Do you wonder if maybe they walked into these great cities that they had conquered, and they looked around and started wondering, man, this place is pretty nice. They've got walls, they got a little bit of gold. We didn't have anything like this back in the wilderness, right? We were in tents, we were eating some bread we found off the ground and some quail. How did they get all this good stuff? And they started sacrificing to whatever gods the Canaanites were serving. Do you think that might have been what happened? I think so. So we must ask ourselves the question, in what areas are you still sacrificing to false gods? What altars are you not tearing down because you still believe they hold some power, some deliverance that you are craving? What false gods are you still worshiping in your life? But think back for a moment. consider the question, why did they fail to conquer? Why did the nation of Israel fail to conquer the very land that was to be theirs? After leaving Egypt destroyed and the walls of Jericho ruined and so many victories through their God left and right, when it actually came to totally completing God's command of driving the people out, why did they fall short? Here's just a couple ideas, two ideas for you to consider. Number one, a lack of faith. Now, this is a very obvious point, but consider, God had said to Joshua earlier in chapter 1 of Joshua, no one will be able to stand before you. That was the promise given to Joshua. No one will be able to stand before you. And God kept His promises and won much larger victories than this one through Israel before. And so we can kind of use that reasoning because we know that it wasn't a lack of ability on God's part, because as long as they put their trust in God and not in themselves, they succeeded, didn't they? They succeeded in everything they set their minds to if they put their faith in God. So then by inference, one reason they may have failed here is likely a lack of faith. But let me suggest a second idea. Why did they fail to conquer? How about complacency? I wonder if maybe they got to a certain point in the conquest and they started to say, well, this is good enough. We made it to the land. We had a few big victories. The people here are actually, kind of nice to us. Isn't that good enough? I make these two suggestions because I believe that these are some of the same shortcomings that we have. These are some of the same shortcomings that we have that keep us from thriving in the Lord the way that we were meant to. We give up a few sins. We come to church on Sundays. We get to be part of this nice big family that's the church. And we think we're doing pretty good. And we decide to do what? Hit the cruise control button. We set it right on that speed, and we just decide we can coast from here. Well, I'm here to tell you this evening, there is no coasting into heaven. There's no coasting into heaven. We must be growing in our faith, not lacking in it or becoming complacent in it. Now pick up back with me in the text in Judges chapter 2, verse 7. Judges chapter 2, verse 7 says this. The people served the Lord all the days of Joshua and all the days of the elders who survived Joshua, who had seen all the great work of the Lord which he had done for Israel. Then Joshua, the son of Nun, the servant of the Lord, died at the age of 110. The great leader, Joshua, whose name means deliverance, and it's actually the same name as Jesus, Yeshua, Joshua dies. And the people continue to do what? They continue to serve God for a few more years. And then we get what I believe is one of the saddest and scariest verses in all of the Old Testament. Judges chapter 2, verse 10. The generation after Joshua were gathered to their fathers, and there arose another generation after them who did not know the Lord, nor yet the work which he had done for Israel. A generation, not just one family, a generation arose who did not know the Lord. This is sad. This is so sad. And unfortunately, Joshua's generation are the ones to blame. They were told to teach, and yet a generation arose that did not know the Lord. The same generation that so powerfully conquered failed to equip the next generation. How could this happen? How could this possibly happen? Now, I'm just going to throw out a couple ideas here, and the first is this. How could this happen? Number one man cannot do it all. One godly leader cannot bear the burden of an entire congregation of doing all of the work of teaching. Now, I don't personally see this as an issue at this church, but this is preventative preaching. A generation arising that did not know the Lord, this is what happens when one man ends up bearing most of the load in a congregation. This is what happens when the mindset of a congregation is, well, we pay the preacher to do that. We pay the preacher to do that, to go out and have Bible studies with people. If that is the mindset of a church, eventually a generation arises that doesn't know the Lord, and everyone is just kind of like left scratching their heads, like, where did everyone go? Why are the pews so empty? Why aren't my children going to a church anywhere? I've seen it happen, and I'm young, but I've seen it happen, guys. When a congregation does not make the burden of teaching and preaching their own burden, when they do not take that burden upon themselves, a generation will arise that does not know the Lord. Suggestion number 2, I think they might have settled into comfort. This goes back to the complacency idea we talked about earlier, but I could very easily see that nation settling into comfort and forgetting the struggle that they had. After the years of intense wilderness wandering and all the warfare that they went through, the next generation, I mean, if you think about it, they really grew up in a time of peace. They had a lot of prosperity. They inherited the blessings without the battles, and as a result, they lacked that firsthand experience of God's beautiful and mighty power of deliverance. It's such an interesting thing to me that those of God's people who suffer and battle the most are the ones who refine the strongest faith. I know you've seen that. The couple who's been through the really difficult loss. The child who grew up with not an ideal family situation. Sometimes those people, when they come to the Lord, end up having the strongest faith. This shows us the importance of good teaching. And not just teaching, but good teaching. I can assure you, if we do not effectively equip the next generation, then they too will fail. If we do not take active and deliberate steps to instill a love of God into the next generation, they will not see the value in a relationship with Him. We're going to revisit this question in just a moment. But ask yourself the question, what are you doing today to equip the next generation? What are you doing this very moment? Every Sunday when we come together, and all the other days when we don't necessarily meet, what are you doing to equip the next generation for a heartfelt and sincere love of our Creator? Because the next generation of Israel was not effectively taught. And I want you to observe the consequences in verses 11 through 13. Look with me in Judges chapter 2, verses 11 through 13. Then the sons of Israel did evil in the sight of the Lord and served the Baals. And they forsook the Lord, the God of their fathers, who had brought them out of the land of Egypt. And they followed other gods from among the gods of the peoples who were around them, and bowed themselves down to them. Thus they provoked the Lord to anger. So they forsook the Lord and served Baal and the Ashtaroth. What happens here? Without effective teaching, they began to serve other gods. They served the other gods of the people. And then in verse 14, this great nation in verse 14 says this: the anger of the Lord burned against Israel, and he gave them into the hands of plunderers who plundered them, and he sold them into the hands of their enemies around them, so that they could no longer stand before their enemies. They serve other gods, and so they provoke the one true God's anger. And so at that point, they've broken the covenant, and God lets them go. You don't want to serve me? Fine. Go serve other gods and see how that works out for you. They're delivered into the hands of other nations. This great nation that appeared to conquer Egypt, they conquered Canaan, they conquered everyone around them, was given into the hand of the king of Mesopotamia. You know what this is like? Bradley, you'll like this one. This would be like University of Tennessee baseball beating the New York Yankees and then turning right around and losing to Columbia Academy. No offense to anyone Columbia Academy folk here, but that's what this would be like. You know, this great victory. They conquered the big leagues, and then they lose to some minor league people. Like, what's going on here? And so what happens after that is the pattern is explained. And this outlines the rest of the book of Judges as we continue to work through this on Sunday nights. But you can see in chapter 2, verses 11 through 13, they served other gods. Chapter 2, verse 14, God's anger is against them. And so in verses 14 and 15, they're sold into the hand of other nations. And then in verse 16, God raises up judges to deliver the people. And the nation is delivered. And then in verse 17, the people do what? They forsake the judges. And the cycle is repeated over and over again. The nation of Israel fell into the sad trap of only serving God when it was convenient. Only when they needed something did they call out to God. Only when it seemed like they could benefit without it really costing them something, because they had reached the point where they had nothing else to give, that's when they turned to the Lord. And so for our last few minutes, I want us to consider 3 ways that we can try to avoid this type of failure in both our personal lives and the life of this congregation. How can we prevent failure? How can we prevent failure? Well, the first way to seek to prevent failure is to examine. Examine, to take inventory, to self-evaluate. This is asking ourselves the questions like, what are our strengths and weaknesses? What am I lacking in that I can improve? And like I said, this works both congregationally and individually. Think for a moment. What are some of the weaknesses we have at Jackson Heights? You know, just throwing this one out here, how about, the lack of people we have on a Sunday evening? Are we required to be here on a Sunday evening? No, of course not. I understand people work, and especially this evening. It's a holiday, so I get that. People are traveling and whatnot. My point here is not to say anything about the people that aren't here tonight. My point is this. How aware are you of this? How aware are you of the workings that are going on in this congregation? What other weaknesses do we have? Now, I'm just now getting back here, so I'm not as in tune as some of you guys hopefully are to a lot of this, but I hope you see the point I'm trying to make. We have to examine. Just look around. See who's here, see who's not here. Maybe just give them a little call, be like, hey, thinking of you. We've got to be aware. We've got to examine. What are some of the strengths we have as a congregation here at Jackson Heights? What are some of our strengths? Well, I'll tell you one, as far as real estate goes, location, location, location. This is a tough place to be as far as location goes, right? I wonder just how many people pass us by here every single day of the week on their way to work. Have you ever thought about that? You know, sometimes I wondered if I, as the intern, should just go out there and just kind of hold up a sign and just kind of you guys ever seen outside a chicken store, someone will put on the chicken costume? What would our mascot be? Probably a sheep or something like that. I don't know. But hold a sign and be hey, come visit us. I don't know. But how many people just go right by us? What about our eldership? We are so blessed to have a plurality of ages and experiences. Speaking of ages, what about the diversity of age we have here as a congregation? We have some Christians who have been Christians longer than even my parents have been alive, and that's a blessing. And there are some young families bringing their kids, raising them up in the knowledge of the Lord. These are good things. We have many strengths. So how can we be using these to our advantage? We have to examine. We have to consider these things. And I'll just say this right here. This very first point, this is where many churches and individuals struggle. This is just step one, though. But why do we fail here? Why do so many of us stop when it comes to examining ourselves? Well, if we're being honest, it's a combination of pride and insecurity. And those are really two sides of the same coin. We don't want to see where we fall short, do we? We don't want to have to face that. We don't want to have to open ourselves up and look inside and see the problems that we actually have. We want to be pretty and attractive to everyone around us. As a church, we want to have one of those really nice videos on our website. I check to make sure we don't have one of these videos. Not that there's anything wrong with these videos, but we want one of those really nice videos where it's just everyone smiling and saying how much they love to be here. That's the perception we want to give. But we've all got problems, guys. We've all got things that we're dealing with. There's nothing wrong with one of those videos, but think for a moment. If nothing changed at Jackson Heights over the next 25 years, where would this church be? Where would this church be in 25 years? That's thinking church-oriented, but what about individually? What are the sins that keep popping up in your life? What are the sins that you just can't seem to put away? You keep coming back to them because they bring you some sort of momentary comfort. Or, on the flip side, what are you not doing that you know you should be doing more of? What are the things that you know, I need to be doing more of this, and I don't exactly know where to start? Talk with someone. Talk with someone who you see doing the very thing that you want to do. Talk with someone, but you've got to examine and see where you're falling short in the first place in order to realize, hey, I need to go talk with someone. What about our weaknesses? Or what about our strengths? What strengths do you have that you can be using in the kingdom? What gifts has God given you? And each one of you have gifts. What gifts has God given you that you can use in the kingdom? Now, when considering this self-examination and taking inventory idea, I'll tell you, this is where it gets tricky. Because whenever we do take inventory of ourselves, when you've done this, each one of us have done this at different points in time, but when you do self-evaluate, when you examine, when you take inventory, what do we, I don't want to say usually, but what do we sometimes do? We react emotionally to what we see. We come across somewhere where we're really falling short, and we either make excuses or we start to beat ourselves up. This is, again, that pride thing that we talked about. We need to learn to take inventory the same way that we would look at a pantry. The same way you would go home and look at a pantry is the way we need to take inventory of ourselves. Simply open the door, open yourselves up, and look. What do I have? What do I not have? What can I do? And what can I make with what I do have? What can I do with what I've got? Yeah, there's some things that are lacking, but what can I do with what I do have? We have to just open that up, and without making excuses or beating ourselves up, just take inventory, even if it's uncomfortable. We've got to examine ourselves. Number 2, how can we prevent this failure? Oh, I shut it off. Oh, there we go. Conquer. Now, this is the point I'll just say I'll be spending the least amount of time on. I know that first one was a little long. But this is the one I'll be spending the least amount of time on because it's very general and it will need to be tailored to whatever you personally are dealing with. But I will just give these 2 points about what to do when you conquer. Number 1, camaraderie. Don't just try to do it yourself. Find help in godly people that you trust. Guys, we as a family have got to be leaning on each other. That's difficult because we got to open ourselves up to people. It's not comfortable. But it's something that we as a family of believers are called to do. Don't try to conquer it yourself. Lean on your brother. Seek wisdom in God's word. Draw near to God. Pray for strength and guidance. And know that any conquering done outside of a relationship with Christ is only temporary. Any bootstrap way you try to do it that's not in a relationship with Christ, you're going to end up falling flat on your face again. It's always only temporary. So number 1, camaraderie. Number 2, compromise. And this is one of those like, don't do that one. Don't compromise. Don't compromise the way that the Israelites did and say, well, we've come this far, that's probably good enough. No! Extinguish the false gods from your life. Do away with them. Tear the altars down. Stop making sacrifices to whatever pet sins that you have. Stop believing that those false gods have anything to offer you. Don't get halfway through the campaign and decide that's good enough. We must conquer completely, but we cannot do it alone. And finally, after taking inventory and taking steps to conquer, consider how you can equip this knowledge and wisdom to the next generation. Our final point is equip. And what I want you to notice is that this is where Joshua's generation fell short. Bible class teachers, those of you who have taught Bible class, are teaching Bible class, and will teach Bible class, your work is important. The work that you do is so valuable. The work you're doing is so important. The foundation that you're giving the next generation is so important. And as that younger generation grows and they turn into those middle schoolers and high schoolers, what do we need to be doing? We need to continue to reveal to them the beautiful allure that God offers that nothing else in this world can fill. As the next generation grows older, they're going to become more aware. They're going to start to look around. They're going to start finding and seeking after other options. And if we have not established the value of a loving relationship with God, it may be too late. We have to show them the beauty of God's Word. So again, ask yourself the question, what are you doing today to equip the next generation? Just one final note to parents out there. We've got a lot of parents, young parents, old parents at this congregation. Teaching the next generation must extend outside of Sunday morning. Teaching the next generation, teaching your kids, has got to come Monday and Tuesday and Wednesday and Thursday and Friday and Saturday. You can't just bring them and Sunday's their only exposure and expect them to grow up with a love and devotion to God. It's got to extend outside of Sunday mornings. a generation arose who did not know the Lord. It happened then, it can happen today. God took such great care of Israel by perfectly upholding His side of the covenant. But Israel failed to completely follow God's commands, and they made a fool of themselves. This evening, as we wrap up, we're about to have an invitation song where you have the opportunity to come forward if you feel like there's a change you need to make in your life. But this evening, as we stand and sing, I want you to consider, where might you be compromising your eternal inheritance? And what I want you to do is take action today by faith to completely conquer. If you have any need, I'd encourage you to come forward while we stand and while we sing.